Hello. My fiancée told me she'd quit her job and expected me to pay for everything because we're basically married. I told her that 3 months of being engaged isn't marriage and doesn't replace a conversation she never had. Then I ended it, covered my own bills, and walked away. I'm Alex, 31M. She's Megan, 29F. We've been together just under 2 years and engaged for 3 months. I'm posting here because I need outside perspective before I convince myself I imagine the whole thing. The text came in while I was at work, halfway through a meeting I wasn't really listening to. So I quit my job today. You'll cover everything for a bit. We're basically married now anyway. No question mark. No lead up. Just a statement. I stared at my phone longer than I probably should have. I remember someone asking me a question and me saying, yeah, without knowing what they asked. My chest felt tight, not angry yet, just stunned. For context, Megan and I don't live together. We talked about it, sure, but we'd agreed to wait until after the wedding. We also kept finances completely separate. That was her idea, by the way. She liked her independence. She said she never wanted to feel financially controlled. I texted back, carefully, you quit without lining something else up? Her reply came fast. My job was toxic. I'm not killing myself for a company that doesn't appreciate me. You make enough. Don't make this a thing. That last sentence sat there like a challenge. We'd never had a conversation about me supporting her. Ever. No timeline. No plan. No. Hey, would you be okay with this for a month or two? Just an assumption that my income had silently become ours. I called her during my lunch break. She answered like nothing was wrong, already annoyed. Why are you stressing, she said. Engagement is basically marriage. What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. I said, that's not how this works. 3 months of engagement isn't marriage. And this is a conversation you never had with me. She laughed. Actually laughed. Wow, she said. I didn't realize I was marrying someone so transactional. That word, transactional, was the first crack. The moment I felt something shift. I told her we needed to talk in person that night. She sighed loudly and said, fine, but don't come at me with numbers and spreadsheets. This is about support. I hung up knowing, for the first time, that we were not having the same relationship. And she had no idea how close she was to losing it. That night, she showed up at my place like she was doing me a favor. Didn't knock. Just walked in, kicked her shoes off, dropped onto my couch, and said, okay, say what you need to say so we can move on. That tone, like I was a coworker whining about PTO. I asked her how long she'd been thinking about quitting. She rolled her eyes. God, Alex. Weeks. Everyone quits jobs they hate. You're acting like I committed a crime. I said, most people don't quit without a plan. She crossed her arms. I do have a plan. You. There it was. Out loud this time. I told her I wasn't comfortable being the plan. That if she wanted to step back from work, we needed to talk timelines, expectations, budgets, basic adult stuff. She laughed again. Same laugh as on the phone. Short, sharp, mean. I knew this would happen, she said. The second I need support, you turn into my dad. I reminded her that she'd always been the one insisting on financial independence. That she'd corrected people when they joked about me paying for things. That she'd said, verbatim, I never want to rely on a man. She waved that off. That was before. Things change when you're engaged. Then she said the line that stuck with me. If you're already thinking like this, maybe you're not ready to be a husband. That was the moment. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet internal click. I realized she wasn't asking if I was okay with this future. She was testing whether I'd comply. I told her again, calmly, that quitting her job without talking to me first wasn't okay. That engagement didn't mean unilateral decisions. That I needed partnership, not assumptions. She stood up, grabbed her bag, and said, wow, I didn't know love came with conditions. At the door, she turned back and added, I thought you were different. Guess I was wrong. Then she left. I didn't chase her. I didn't text her. I sat on the couch, staring at the spot where she'd been sitting, realizing something I hadn't let myself think yet. This wasn't about money. It was about control. And the next conversation would decide everything. She didn't text me that night. Or the next morning. That alone was unusual. Megan was the type who needed the last word. Silence was her punishment tactic, and I knew I was supposed to feel anxious, guilty, ready to apologize just to restore normalcy. Instead, I felt clear. The clarity scared me more than the argument. Around noon the next day, my phone buzzed. I've been thinking, she wrote. You really embarrassed me last night. No hello. No acknowledgement of quitting her job. Just a reframing of events where I was suddenly the offender. I asked how I embarrassed her. You made me feel unsupported. Like I can't rely on my own fiancé. Do you know how that feels? There it was again. Fiancé. Used like a lever. I told her I wasn't trying to embarrass her. I was trying to understand why she made a life-altering decision without including me. She responded with a paragraph about how stressed she'd been, how drained she felt, how she thought engagement meant safety. She said she needed a soft place to land, and that I was making it feel conditional. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. My mom agrees with me, by the way. She said when a man proposes, he's agreeing to provide. I stared at that message longer than the original one about quitting her job. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't stress. This was ideology. I asked her directly. So you expected me to just say yes? She replied, I expected you to step up. No denial. No hesitation. I told her stepping up doesn't mean being volunteered without consent. That I wasn't refusing to support her. I was refusing to be assigned responsibility without a discussion. She sent back, this is why women don't feel safe relying on men. That was the moment I stopped typing mid-reply, because I realized something important. Anything short of full compliance was always going to be framed as moral failure. If I said yes, I was a good partner. If I asked questions, I was selfish. If I hesitated, I was unsafe. There was no version of this where my boundaries survived. I asked her to meet that evening, not to argue, but to decide what we were actually doing. She agreed. Added, I hope you're ready to be honest with yourself. I was, just not in the way she thought. She arrived late on purpose. I know that sounds petty, but it matters. When someone's trying to regain control, they rarely show up on time. She walked in, glanced around my apartment like she was evaluating whether it still belonged to her, then sat across from me with her arms crossed. So, she said, are you done punishing me? That's how she framed it. Me setting a boundary had already been rewritten as punishment. I told her I wasn't punishing her. I told her I needed to understand what she expected from me going forward, because what she'd assumed wasn't something I'd agreed to. She sighed dramatically. Alex, I'm not asking for forever. Just until I find something better. Why is that so hard? I asked her why it was so hard to ask first. She looked genuinely confused by that question, like it hadn't occurred to her as a necessary step. Because, she said slowly, I didn't think I needed permission from my fiancé. There it was again. Permission. As if discussion and permission were the same thing. As if partnership meant authority flowed one direction. I said, I'm not your boss. And you're not my dependent. But you don't get to make me responsible for your life without my input. Her face hardened. The softness disappeared completely. Wow, she said. So if I lost my job tomorrow, you'd just let me drown? That was the bait. The emotional trap. I didn't take it. I said, if you lost your job, we'd talk. You didn't lose it. You quit. And you decided I'd handle the consequences. She leaned forward. Because that's what men do when they're serious. I asked her a question I hadn't planned to ask. If I said no, if I said I wasn't comfortable with this, what would you do? She didn't answer right away. She studied my face, like she was calculating something. Finally, she said, I'd seriously reconsider marrying you. Not we'd. She'd. That was the breaking point. Not emotionally loud. Just final. I nodded and said, okay, then we're not getting married. She blinked. Once. Twice. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. You're being dramatic. I stood up. No, I said. I'm being accurate. And for the first time since I'd met her, she looked unsure. She didn't cry. That surprised me. Instead, she laughed, soft at first, then sharper, like I'd just told a joke that didn't land. You're ending our engagement over money, she said. I corrected her. Over consent. She waved her hand dismissively. Same thing. You're choosing dollars over your future wife. That framing again. Reduce it. Simplify it. Make me the villain. I told her I wasn't choosing money over her. I was choosing not to be forced into a role I never agreed to play. She stood up, pacing now. You know what? I gave up a lot for this relationship. I assumed you'd have my back. I asked her what she'd given up. She stopped pacing and stared at me. Wow. So now you're keeping score? I said, you're the one saying I owe you. That landed harder than anything else I'd said. She picked up her bag. I can't believe I almost married someone who would abandon me the second things got hard. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just said the sentence that had been forming quietly in my head since the night before. This isn't things getting hard. This is you deciding my life for me. She walked to the door, then turned back, eyes narrowed. You're really okay walking away from this? I thought about the wedding planning emails. The guest list she'd already started without me. The way she'd said you're not ready to be a husband, like a verdict. Yes, I said. I am. She scoffed. Good luck finding someone who won't expect more from you. I opened the door for her. She hesitated, just for a second. I think she expected me to stop her. To apologize. To cave. I didn't. When the door closed, the apartment went quiet in a way that felt clean. Later that night, I boxed up the ring. Not angrily. Not ceremonially. Just practically. The next morning, I woke up without that low-level dread I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. And that's when I knew I hadn't lost a fiancé. I dodged a future where my consent was optional. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in waves. The first wave was silence. 2 full days without a word from her. No angry texts. No apologies. Just nothing. I knew that silence wasn't peace. It was strategy. She was waiting for panic. For regret. For me to come crawling back with a softened stance and an open wallet. Instead, I went to work, paid my bills, cooked dinner, and slept better than I had in weeks. On the 3rd day, my phone lit up. I can't believe you told people we're done. I hadn't told anyone. Not friends. Not family. The only person who could have told anyone was her. I asked who she meant. My mom. My sister. My friends, she replied. They're all shocked. You blindsided me. That word again. Blindsided. As if quitting her job without warning hadn't been the opening punch. I told her I hadn't told anyone because I didn't feel the need to control the narrative. She sent back, wow. So you really don't care how this makes me look. There it was. Not feel. Look. I said, I care how you feel. I don't feel responsible for explaining your decisions. That message went unanswered for an hour. Then came the second wave. I would have supported you if the roles were reversed, she wrote. I stared at that one for a long time. Because it sounded noble, generous, and completely unprovable. I replied, maybe, but you didn't give me the chance to choose. Her response was immediate and venomous. So now you're saying I manipulated you? I didn't answer right away. I knew anything I said would be twisted. Finally, I sent one sentence. I'm saying partnership doesn't start with ultimatums. That's when she sent the message that confirmed everything. You're going to regret this when you realize what you threw away over pride. Not love. Not trust. Pride. I blocked her number after that. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Because I finally understood something important. She didn't want a partner. She wanted a provider who didn't ask questions. And I was done auditioning for that role. Blocking her didn't end it. It just changed the delivery method. 2 days later, my sister called me. Hey, she said carefully. I just got a weird message from Megan. I asked what kind of weird. She wanted to know if you were okay financially, and if you'd calmed down yet. Then she said you were having some kind of commitment panic, and that she was giving you space to come to your senses. That phrase again. Giving you space. Like this was a timeout, not a breakup. I felt embarrassed, not because I'd done anything wrong, but because she was still trying to manage the narrative around me, even without access to me. My sister asked if it was true. I told her the whole story. The job. The assumption. The "we're basically married" line. There was a long pause. Then my sister said, so she didn't ask. She just informed you. Yes. That's not marriage, she said. That's conscription. Word traveled fast after that. Mutual friends started reaching out, not to argue, but to check. Every conversation followed the same pattern. At first, what happened? Then, silence. Then, oh. Apparently Megan had been telling people a softer version. That she'd quit her job for her mental health, and I'd panicked and pulled support. She never mentioned skipping the conversation part. One friend told me something that stuck. She kept saying, once we're married, it wouldn't even be a question. And everyone kept asking, but you weren't married, right? That's when it hit me. In her head, the engagement wasn't a promise. It was a countdown clock. Every boundary I had was just something she planned to outwait. That night, I took the ring to the jeweler and returned it. The clerk asked if everything was okay in that polite, distant way. I said yeah. I just realized I was the only one planning a future. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter. Not relieved exactly, just unburdened. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped thinking about what I'd lost and started recognizing what I'd avoided. And that realization didn't hurt. It steadied me. The last time she tried to reach me, it wasn't directly. It was an email. Long, carefully written. No insults. No sarcasm. Just enough softness to make it dangerous. She said she'd been doing a lot of reflecting. That she might have come on strong. That she never meant to make me feel used. Then came the pivot. She said she'd found a temporary job. Part-time. Not ideal, but a step. She said she was willing to slow things down, if that's what I needed. Maybe push the wedding. Maybe reset expectations. What she never said was I was wrong. She framed it like a compromise we were both responsible for needing. At the end, she wrote, "I hope you're ready to stop seeing me as the enemy." That line sealed it. Because I had never seen her as the enemy. I'd seen her as someone who assumed I'd adapt to whatever she decided. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat with the uncomfortable truth that I almost married someone who believed love meant access. That commitment meant compliance. That a ring meant authority. I thought about what would have happened if I had said yes that first day. If I'd covered rent, groceries, expenses. How quickly just for now would have turned into, "Why are you being difficult?" How any attempt to renegotiate would have been framed as betrayal. I imagined being married and having to ask permission to stop providing. That thought made my chest tighten. So I deleted the email. Not angrily. Not ceremonially. Just deliberately. Later that week, I updated my emergency contacts. Took her off. Removed her from shared folders she didn't need anymore. Quiet, unglamorous steps that felt more final than any argument. Some people end relationships in explosions. Others end them by refusing to re-enter the cycle. I chose the second. And for the first time since the engagement, the future didn't feel heavy. It felt like mine again. I thought that would be the end of it. That once the email went unanswered, once the ring was returned, once the shared threads were quietly cut, the story would finally settle. I underestimated how hard Megan took losing leverage. A week later, I ran into her by accident at the grocery store. Middle of the aisle. Cereal boxes between us like neutral territory. She looked thinner, sharper, like she'd been rehearsing speeches in her head. "Oh," she said. "So you're just fine now?" I nodded. "Yeah, I am." That seemed to irritate her more than anger ever could. She crossed her arms. "Must be nice. Walking away when things get inconvenient." I almost laughed at that word. Inconvenient. I said, "You quitting your job wasn't inconvenient. It was revealing." Her jaw tightened. "You really think you're the good guy here?" "I think I did the honest thing," I replied, even when it was uncomfortable. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "You know, everyone thinks you're afraid of commitment." There it was. The final card. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. I just said, "I'm afraid of signing contracts I didn't read." She stared at me, stunned, like she hadn't expected me to still sound calm. "Well," she snapped, "good luck finding someone who won't expect you to provide." I met her eyes. Good luck finding someone who doesn't expect a conversation. She walked away without another word. Standing there, I realized something important. She hadn't loved me. She'd loved the version of me that didn't push back. The version that nodded. That absorbed. That adapted. And the moment I stopped being that guy, the relationship didn't fracture. It ended. Cleanly. Permanently. I paid for my groceries. Drove home. Cooked dinner. And for the first time, running into her didn't reopen anything. It closed it. It's been a month now. Long enough for the noise to die down. Long enough for people to stop asking careful questions and start accepting that it's actually over. Long enough for me to see the whole thing clearly instead of through the fog of shock and disappointment. Here's the part that still gets me. Megan genuinely believed I would fold. Every step of the way, she assumed resistance was temporary. That I'd cool off. That I'd remember the ring, the plans, the sunk costs. That eventually I'd decide it was easier to pay than to push back. That was the miscalculation. Because the moment she said, "We're basically married now," something in me disengaged. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, permanently. That was the breaking point she never noticed. By the time she tried to soften it, to compromise, to reframe it as mutual misunderstanding, I was already gone emotionally. She was negotiating with someone who had already left the room. I didn't end the engagement in anger. I ended it in clarity. I paid my own bills. I kept my own life intact. I walked away from a future where every boundary would have been treated like a flaw. Sometimes people think relationships end with shouting or betrayal or some explosive final moment. Ours ended with a sentence that revealed everything. "You'll cover everything. We're basically married now." She thought that sentence secured her future. Instead, it showed me mine. And once I saw it, I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate. I didn't stay. I just walked away and didn't look back. Bye-bye.